Today on Anvil of War Gaming, we're discussing advanced list building for Warhammer 40,000 9th edition. Let's check it out.
Anvil of War! Let's talk tactics!
Hey guys, and welcome back to Anvil of War Gaming. Today on Let's Talk Tactics, we're discussing advanced list building. Now this is part 2 of a 2-part series. Part 1 covering off on the basics of list building, including organizing your units into detachments, faction keywords, and all of that great stuff. So if you're looking for an introduction into building your list for Warhammer 40,000 9th edition, check out that video. We'll link it in the video description below. If you're looking for more advanced sort of the finesse of creating a Warhammer 40,000 army list, today we're going to be discussing that in depth. So before I get into the video, I do want to do a quick reminder. If you are enjoying our content, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and help support the channel that way. You can also support the channel by supporting our sponsors over at Red Dragon in Ottawa, Ontario. There's a link to their web store in the video description below. We love those guys and they support us infinitely. So if you guys could check out their web store, we appreciate it. Now, when we're getting into advanced list building, just a quick little backstory. I by no means am a heavy competitive player. I love the fluff as much as I do love the game itself, and I wouldn't call myself an expert on building lists, but I have learned quite a bit over the years, attending many tournaments, placing fairly well in every single tournament I've gone into, and you know, but I just wanted to share some of the knowledge that I've taken in from reading what I've read and playing against the players that I've played against, and sort of how they sculpt their lists, how I sculpt my list, and sort of like the general key points that we're going to discuss today. So first things first, with many factors, many nuances to consider when building a list, we kind of have to start off with your decision to play a specific army, your decision to select a faction and select a sub-faction within that faction. When I'm talking about sub-faction, you know, we're talking about our Space Marine chapters. So, you know, I've decided I want to play Space Marines. Now I've decided that I want to play Space Wolves. I'm going to use them as an example a lot just because they're near and dear to my heart. But yeah, we've decided that we want to play this specific sub-faction of this faction, and we got to pay attention to those keywords. We have to pay attention to what the general feel of that army is. When I say the general feel, I mean they have specific rules, faction rules, that will benefit them in a certain light. If you're playing Space Wolves, you know just from the chapter tactics that it's going to be a melee-focused army. No surprises, they like to lean towards their melee-specific units. This is the same for across the board for any faction. If your army is a heavy shooty army, has a lot of shooting options, then and the sub-faction that you've chosen rewards you for you know, your shooting units, then obviously you're going to want to lean heavier towards those shooting options within your codex and your army collection. It's really important to pay attention to this. It's really important to tap into those strengths and understand your weaknesses. And we'll get a little bit more into that further in the video, but I just really want everyone to understand that that's kind of the fundamentals of list building, is that you want to tap into those special rules. And the same goes for selecting units. Now, when we're getting into selecting your units that you're going to be using in your army, it's important to reward yourself for taking that specific chapter tactic or that specific sub-faction and pick units that are going to benefit this. Again, as I mentioned, melee options for a Space Wolf army does, you know, it jives. So if you want to start with like kind of where you're going to get your bare bones for your list, you have to start looking at your core, your infantry, your troop choices, because those are ultimately going to be your most predominant objective scorers. There are going to be the guys that you want babysitting objectives and things like that. Not always, not in every situation, but most of the time, these are the guys that you're looking at to do something like that. When it comes down to picking specific units that are going to be assisting those units, you want to look at there's a bunch of things you want to look at, but number one, you want to know your stratagems. Know all of the stratagems available in your codex, in your army, and have a plan as to what you're going to be using those stratagems on. What unit is going to benefit from those the most? Most of the time now with 9th edition codexes, it's really simple because the unit's keyword is in the stratagem description, so you already know who's getting to use what for the most part. There obviously are general stratagems that cover multiple units or a broader keyword, and that you'll find throughout your army. And those stratagems, you kind of want to know when to use them, because a lot of them are situational. A lot of them are going to be kind of like, when am I going to use this? So when planning your army, it's important to pick units that you know you're going to be using them. Have a plan going in. And make sure that plan is flexible. When talking about selecting units, I mean, obviously putting all of your eggs into one basket, selecting a big scare unit that's going to be the center of your army is great. But do you have a plan if that unit gets destroyed turn one? Is your entire army based on that unit surviving? If so, really contemplate your decision to take that unit, maybe peel back a little bit, maybe reduce the unit size. I mean, sometimes I find that especially newer players will get in and they'll want to make a big blob of troops, or they'll take a small squad, and the small squad may be better suited for a larger squad, and the large squad may be better suited as a smaller squad. So it's important to pay attention to that, and a lot of that comes with playtesting your army. Well, again, we'll discuss that a little bit further down the road, but when I'm talking about knowing your strengths and knowing your synergies within your units, you're not going to take a character that can benefit a specific unit that you don't have in your army. It's just you're not going to do that, because it's you're kind of handicapping yourself. Now, at the same time, if there are specific characters that have auras but maybe are better suited doing things solo, like they're a character that you're going to toss into your enemy army, maybe they're super melee focused, or a shooting unit that's kind of independent and you're going to use to sniper or target out other characters, those exist. So if they don't necessarily benefit other units in your army, that's fine, as long as you already have that kind of role and that idea for them. I'm looking at what we call smash captains, which is Space Marine captains that are loaded out with like a thunderhammer, a jetpack, and that's like the traditional loadout. And can't believe I'm saying that's traditional now, but yep, that is traditional now. These units are the ones that are going to sort of jump in and start fighting in melee, and maybe pick out big scary monsters in your opponent's army and go straight for that. So when we're talking about picking these characters, picking these units, it's really important, again, like I said before, to have a plan. It's important to understand what their role is. Are they going to be holding an objective? Are they going to be a unit that's really good at or dedicated to targeting enemy vehicles or enemy scary monsters? Are they a ranged unit, like something like a Devastator squad that has these heavy weapons that are able to damage big targets in the enemy army? Know these roles, have a plan as to what this is going to target, what this is going to target, what are they going to do, what are they doing for the game, and then have some flexibility, which comes with, again, playtesting your army. Also, pay attention to the percentage of your army. Again, as mentioned before, a big squad sometimes can look great on paper, and sometimes they're terrifying. Yes, that one squad might be able to take out half of the enemy army, but again, if you lose it in the first turn, you're going to be fighting back for the rest of the game. You're going to be trying to crawl back. That's super important to pay attention to. Now, when it comes into balance for your list, when we talk about balancing, and when we talk about that's a great segue when we're talking about unit sizes. It's important to consider all comers. So basically making sure that your list can adapt to any enemies that you might be facing. A lot of players will do what's called list tailoring. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big advocate for list tailoring. I think if you know what your opponent's going to bring, especially when you're playing in a game where maybe you're playing against a buddy that's also new to the game, or is new to the game, and you know exactly what's in his collection, you know exactly what he's going to bring. So you tailor your larger collection potentially to be able to just kind of to steamroll it. I don't really think that's in good sport. I don't think that's really... I prefer to pick a list and just stick to that list and play everybody with that one list. And that comes into making a really balanced list that's going to be able to play all those players and win games with. Now, when you go into a tournament, you don't know what you're going to be facing. You don't know what's going to be coming at you unless the meta is super heavy on one specific faction at a time. Then maybe you know, like, okay, probably 2 out of my 4 games I'm going to be playing this kind of a list because everybody's playing it right now. That's not always the case in tournaments, but and it depends on your local meta and where your tournament is and what the size of the tournament and all these things. But it's really important to factor these in when you're building your list. Think about balance. Think about the ability to fight different factions. Pay attention to that. Also, when we're talking about understanding our army, when I talk about playtesting, now it's really important to play games with your army. Build an army. Don't necessarily, crumple it up, throw it in the trash because you had one bad game. That doesn't necessarily mean that your list is the problem. There may be small tweaks that you need to make, but don't judge your list's strength off of a single game, especially if it's that first game with that new list. It takes time and it takes effort and lots of games to really understand your army, understand your faction, understand the unit synergies, and make sure that you have those stratagems all memorized. That all comes with time. So when you're building your list, kind of stick to it. If you need to make small tweaks, if you think, okay, this unit's not performing very well because of the equipment option I took on them or something like that, make those small adjustments for sure as you go. But just don't overhaul the whole list right off the bat. Stick to a list a little while, and that will reward you in the end, because you're going to end up knowing that list so well that you're going to know its strengths and its weaknesses, and you're going to be able to play to those in the game. It's a lot of... Warhammer 40,000 is a lot of risk versus reward. That you can get into the math hammer of the game, and you can discuss all of the probabilities of your dice rolls and whether or not what's the most optimal equipment option, unit size, all these things. They can be factored in, and that's something I encourage you to look at if you really want to go down that competitive path. But it's also important to just understand, even starting with just the basic fundamentals, that on two dice, the average roll is going to be a 7. The most common roll you're going to roll is a 7. So knowing things like that, so when you're, bringing a unit out of reserves more than 9 inches away from an enemy, and you know that the average dice roll is a 7, and you don't have anything to allow you re-rolls or increase your charge range, don't expect that to work every time, because you'll have to roll an above average roll in order to get it, in order to make it in. So things like this are really important, and that really feeds into like we discussed before, the synergies, knowing your characters, knowing what special rules they have, auras and things like that, because you're going to want to plan your army around having those characters that are going to allow you to do things like charge that 9 inches. Risk versus reward. Understand that if you commit this unit to fighting this unit, it's not going to be able to fight this unit. things like that. Understanding that is super important when you're looking at building your list. And really, that's all we have for today's video on advanced list building. There's tons more nuances and tons of factors depending on the faction that you're bringing. Different factions, different strengths, different weaknesses, all these things. But it's important to just remember that playtesting is, I would say, the biggest takeaway from this. It's super important, and not just throwing away your list just because of one bad game. I would really strongly recommend playing a few more games before you pass judgment on your list that you've made, and understand that, you know, if you don't have a huge collection of miniatures and you only have specific units because you purchased them for a set army list, then it's going to kind of evolve over time. Players that have a huge collection to draw from are obviously going to be at a bigger advantage in that regard. So just be patient, and we hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. If you do have any contributions, any comments, any preferences for how you're building your lists, share them with the community, comment in the video below, let us know your thoughts, and until next time, guys.
Sponsored by...
Thanks for watching Anvil of War Gaming, guys. Really appreciate all your love and support. Click that subscribe button if you want to subscribe to the channel, and check out some more of our videos. We're discussing the list building for what we're discussing today for advanced builds.